Evelyn discovers a hidden compartment in her late mother's antique writing desk. She expects nothing more than forgotten receipts or old postcards. Instead, she finds a letter written in her mother's hand, a confession so devastating it will shatter everything she thought she knew about her identity, her family and the woman who raised her. The attic smelled of cedar and time suspended. Dust particles floated through the single shaft of afternoon light that cut through the dormer window, illuminating boxes stacked like memories too heavy to carry downstairs. Evelyn Crawford stood at the top of the narrow staircase, her breath forming small clouds in the November chill, her fingers already numb despite the wool cardigan wrapped tight around her shoulders. She hadn't been up here in years, not since before her mother died. Not since the world made sense in the small, predictable ways it used to. Now, 3 months after the funeral, the house felt like a mausoleum of unfinished business. Her brother Daniel had been pushing her to clear things out, to put the property on the market before winter truly set in. But Evelyn moved through grief, like she moved through everything else in her life, methodically, carefully, touching each memory as if it might shatter. She had always been that way, deliberate. Her mother used to call it being thoughtful. Her ex-husband had called it being cold. Evelyn called it survival. The floorboards creaked under her weight as she navigated between towers of cardboard boxes labeled in her mother's careful handwriting. Christmas decorations, Daniel's baby clothes, tax records 79 through 85. Each box a catalogue of a life lived in this house on Maple Street, in this town where nothing ever changed, and everyone knew everyone else's sorrows before they knew their own. Evelyn's eyes landed on something pushed against the far wall, half hidden behind a dressmaker's dummy and a stack of National Geographic magazines from the 1960s. Her mother's writing desk. The antique mahogany piece that had belonged to her grandmother before that, passed down through 3 generations of women who had sat at it to write letters, pay bills, record their private thoughts in journals no one else would ever read. She remembered that desk from childhood, remembered doing her homework at it on rainy afternoons while her mother cooked dinner downstairs, the smell of pot roast drifting up through the floorboards, remembered the way the wood gleamed when polished, the intricate carved details along the edges, the small brass handles on each of the 5 drawers. Evelyn pushed the dummy aside and ran her hand along the desk's surface. Dust came away on her fingers, thick and soft. The wood beneath was still beautiful despite decades of neglect. She tried the top drawer. It stuck at first, swollen with humidity, then slid open with a protesting groan. Inside were the expected things: old pens dried to uselessness, paper clips rusted together, rubber bands that crumbled at her touch, a leather address book with names of people long dead. She worked through the other drawers systematically. Bills from 1987. A cache of sympathy cards from when her father died. Recipes clipped from magazines, never made. The archaeology of an ordinary life. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that explained the strange heaviness in her chest, the feeling that she was looking for something without knowing what it was. The bottom right drawer was the last. It slid open smoothly, better maintained than the others, and inside was only a single item. A wooden box, plain and unadorned, about the size of a hardcover book. Evelyn lifted it out carefully. It was heavier than she expected, solid walnut by the look of it, the kind of craftsmanship you didn't see anymore. There was no latch, no visible way to open it. She turned it over in her hands, examining it from every angle. That's when she noticed it, a small imperfection in the grain on one side. Not an imperfection, a seam. Her fingers found the edge and pressed gently. Something clicked, so soft she almost missed it. A false bottom in the drawer. Evelyn set the wooden box aside and reached back into the drawer, feeling along the bottom panel. Her fingers found a tiny groove, barely wide enough for a fingernail. She pressed and lifted, and the false bottom came up easily, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside was a single envelope. It was old, the paper thick and yellowed with age, the kind of stationery no one used anymore. No name on the front, no address, just a single word written in ink so faded it was almost brown. Truth. Evelyn's heart began to beat faster. She had that sudden, instinctive feeling that she was standing at the edge of something, that opening this envelope would be like stepping off a cliff, that the ground beneath her, already so unstable since her mother's death, was about to give way entirely. The attic suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. Outside, a crow called once, harsh and lonely, and somewhere in the distance she could hear the neighbor's dog barking. Normal sounds, the world continuing as it always had. But everything felt different now. Everything felt like it was holding its breath. She should have put it back. She should have closed the drawer, carried the desk downstairs, and never thought about the hidden compartment again. But Evelyn had never been good at leaving questions unanswered. It was the teacher in her, maybe. 32 years in a classroom, teaching history to teenagers who thought the past was irrelevant, teaching them that every question had an answer if you were willing to dig deep enough. So she dug. Her fingers, steady despite everything, slipped beneath the flap of the envelope. The glue had long since dried and cracked, so it opened easily. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds, the creases worn soft as fabric. She unfolded it carefully, afraid it might tear, and began to read. The handwriting was her mother's. Evelyn would have recognized it anywhere. The careful loops, the slight rightward slant, the way the crossbars on the T's never quite touched the stems. But the words. The words were something else entirely. "My dearest Evelyn," it began, "if you are reading this, I am gone, and you have found what I have hidden for so long." Evelyn's hands began to shake. The paper rustled between her fingers, a sound impossibly loud in the silent attic. She couldn't look away from the words, couldn't stop reading even as her heart began to hammer against her ribs. "There is no easy way to tell you this, no gentle words that will soften what I must confess. I have carried this secret for 53 years. I have carried it through your childhood, through every birthday and Christmas and graduation. I have carried it through your father's death and your divorce, and every moment you have needed me. And I have never been brave enough to tell you the truth while I was alive to face the consequences. For that, I am so deeply, profoundly sorry." The words blurred. Evelyn blinked hard, forcing her eyes to focus. Her throat felt tight, her breath shallow. She glanced toward the attic stairs, half expecting someone to appear, to tell her this was a mistake, a cruel joke. But there was only silence and dust, and the pale afternoon light filtering through the window. She continued reading. "You are not who you think you are. The birth certificate with your name on it, the photographs of me pregnant, the stories I have told you about the day you were born, all of it is a lie. A necessary lie, I told myself. A lie built on love, I wanted to believe, but a lie nonetheless." Evelyn's vision narrowed. The edges of the room seemed to darken, closing in. She gripped the letter tighter, the paper crinkling under her fingers. This couldn't be real, this couldn't be happening. Her mother, careful, devout, rule-following Martha Crawford, couldn't have written these words. "Your name was not always Evelyn. When you came to me, you were called Sarah, Sarah Elizabeth Hartley. You were 6 months old. You had your father's eyes, though you would never know him, and your mother's delicate hands. I know this because I saw them both. I saw them for only a moment, but I have never forgotten their faces. Sarah." The name echoed in Evelyn's mind, like something from a dream she couldn't quite remember. Sarah Elizabeth Hartley. Not Evelyn Marie Crawford. Not the name on her social security card, her driver's license, her teaching certificate. Not the name she had written thousands of times over 53 years. Someone else's name. Someone else's life. She forced herself to keep reading, though every instinct screamed at her to stop, to burn the letter, to pretend she had never found it. It was July of 1971. Your father and I had been trying for a baby for 8 years. 8 years of prayers and doctor visits and disappointments that carved holes in our marriage. 8 years of watching friends have children while our arms remained empty. I was 36 years old. In those days, that was considered too old, nearly impossible. We had begun the process of adoption through the county, but the waiting list was years long. We had accepted that we might never be parents. Evelyn could picture her mother writing these words. Could see her sitting at this very desk, pen in hand, shoulders bent under the weight of confession. How long had it taken to write this letter? How many times had she started over, searching for words that could possibly explain the unexplainable? Then your father met a man at work, Thomas Hartley. He was a mechanic at the plant, quiet and hard-working, only 24 years old. He had a young wife, Rebecca, and a baby daughter. He showed your father pictures. He seemed proud, happy. But there were shadows in his eyes, your father said later. Shadows we didn't understand until it was too late. A mechanic named Thomas Hartley, a young wife named Rebecca. These were names Evelyn had never heard before, yet they belonged to her somehow. her original parents, the people who had created her, carried her, brought her into the world. Strangers. The wooden box sat beside her on the dusty floor. Evelyn glanced at it now, wondering if there was more inside, more secrets waiting to be uncovered, but she couldn't bring herself to open it yet. The letter was already too much, too heavy, too devastating. 2 weeks after that conversation, Thomas Hartley came to our house late at night. It was raining, I remember, a summer storm, the kind that makes the whole world smell like wet earth and electricity. He was standing on our porch with a bundle in his arms, soaked through, shaking. At first I thought something terrible had happened, an accident, but then he held out the bundle, and I saw you. Evelyn pressed her free hand against her mouth. She could barely breathe. You were wrapped in a yellow blanket, sleeping despite the thunder. So small, so perfect, so unaware that your entire life was about to change. Thomas didn't say much. He said Rebecca had left him. He said he couldn't do it alone. He said he was drowning, that he was going to do something he couldn't come back from if someone didn't help him. I didn't understand what he meant then. I understand now. The letter continued, but Evelyn had to stop, had to set it down in her lap and press the heels of her hands against her eyes. Her whole body was shaking now, trembling like she was standing in that summer storm her mother had described, cold and drenched and lost. If this story has touched your heart so far, please don't forget to leave your like, share your thoughts in the comments about what you would do in Evelyn's place, and send this to someone who understands that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth finding. She picked up the letter again. She had to finish it, had to know everything. Evelyn stood up from the floor, her legs unsteady, and moved to the old rocking chair by the window. She needed support, needed something solid beneath her. The chair creaked as she sat, that familiar sound now feeling like a lie too. How many times had her mother sat in this chair? How many times had she rocked Evelyn as a baby, knowing the truth, carrying it like a stone in her chest? She smoothed the letter against her thigh and continued reading. Your father and I should have called the police. We should have demanded answers, insisted on proper procedures, protected everyone involved. But we didn't. We were not thinking clearly. We were thinking only of the miracle in front of us. A baby, a real baby, in our arms after so many years of emptiness. Thomas was gone before we could ask the questions we should have asked. He left you there on our porch and disappeared into the rain. We never saw him again. Never saw him again. The words hung in the air like smoke. What had happened to Thomas Hartley? Had he disappeared by choice or by force? Had he regretted leaving his daughter? Had he spent the rest of his life looking for her? Had he spent the rest of his life in prison? Evelyn's mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. She thought of her mother and father, the people she had always called by those names, standing in their doorway on a rainy night in 1971, holding a stolen child, because that's what she was. That's what the letter was really saying, beneath all the careful words and justifications. She was stolen. We kept you inside for 3 days. Your father called in sick to work. I unplugged the telephone. We drew the curtains and pretended the outside world didn't exist. And we fell in love with you. I know how that sounds. I know it seems impossible to justify. But you have to understand. We had wanted a child for so long. You fit in our arms like you had always belonged there. You laughed when your father made funny faces. You reached for me when you cried. In 3 days you became ours completely. The justification of thieves. The rationalization of kidnappers. Evelyn felt sick. She felt her whole identity crumbling like old paper, disintegrating in her hands. On the 4th day your father went back to work. He asked about Thomas Hartley casually, carefully. No one had seen him. No one knew where he'd gone. There was talk that he'd left town suddenly. Family emergency, something like that. The plant manager seemed annoyed but not concerned. A week passed, then 2 weeks, then a month. And slowly, we began to believe that maybe no one was looking for you. That maybe no one ever would. No one looking. The phrase made Evelyn's chest ache. What about Rebecca, the mother who had supposedly left? What about grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends? Had no one noticed a 6-month-old baby disappearing from the world? We moved carefully after that. We told everyone I had been pregnant, that I had kept it quiet because of my age and previous disappointments. It wasn't difficult to make people believe. We had been so private about our struggles. Most of our friends lived in other towns. My own mother had passed away 2 years before, and your father's parents were in Florida, too far away to visit often. We had a doctor friend who was willing to backdate records to create a birth certificate that showed you were born to us. It cost us everything we had saved, but we paid it. We would have paid anything. A doctor friend, backdated records, a falsified birth certificate. The conspiracy went deeper than Evelyn had imagined. It wasn't just her parents. Others had been involved. Others had known the truth and buried it. I want you to understand that we truly believed we were saving you. Thomas Hartley had been desperate, possibly dangerous. Rebecca had abandoned her child. We told ourselves that you were better off with us, with parents who wanted you desperately, who would give you everything. And we did give you everything, Evelyn. Every ounce of love we possessed. Every opportunity we could provide. We gave you a good life, a safe life. I have to believe that counts for something. A good life, a safe life, built on lies, built on theft, built on the erasure of another family's existence. Evelyn thought of her childhood, the birthday parties and family dinners, the Christmases around the tree in the living room, her father teaching her to ride a bike in the driveway, his hands steady on the seat, her mother braiding her hair before school, patient with every tangle, summer vacations to the lake, Sunday church services where they sat in the same pew every week, a life that had felt solid, real, true, all of it built on sand. Your father died believing we had done the right thing. In his final days, when the cancer had taken almost everything else, he asked me if I thought you would forgive us. I told him yes, I told him you would understand, but I was lying to him just as I had lied to you. I don't know if you will forgive us. I don't know if you can. Her father had known. Of course he had known. He had been there that rainy night. He had been part of every decision afterward. Evelyn tried to summon anger toward him, but he had been dead for 12 years now. You couldn't rage at a ghost. You couldn't demand answers from ashes scattered in the rose garden behind the house. I have watched you become the woman you are, strong, intelligent, principled. You became a teacher because you wanted to give children the truth about the world, about history, about how things really happened. The irony has not been lost on me. Every time you talked about the importance of honesty, of primary sources, of not hiding from difficult truths, I felt the weight of my own hypocrisy, but I still could not tell you. I was too afraid, too selfish, too much of a coward. Evelyn's vision blurred with tears she had been holding back. Her mother's words were breaking something inside her, cracking open a place she had kept carefully protected all her life. She had always prided herself on being logical, controlled, unshakable, but this was too much. This was everything. Daniel does not know. Your brother is your brother in every way that matters. We adopted him legally 3 years after you came to us, through proper channels, with all the correct paperwork. His history is clean. His identity is real. Please do not burden him with this secret unless you feel you must. He loved me. He loves you. Some truths serve no purpose except to cause pain. Daniel didn't know. Her younger brother, who had called her every day since their mother's funeral, who was worried about her, who wanted to help her sort through the house and move forward. He didn't know that his sister wasn't really his sister, that the family he had always believed in was a construction, a careful illusion maintained for decades. Should she tell him? Could she carry this alone? The afternoon light had shifted, grown longer and more golden. Evelyn had no idea how long she'd been sitting in the attic, reading and rereading her mother's confession. The letter felt alive in her hands, warm and dangerous. She was almost at the end now, almost through. I have left you something in the wooden box. Open it when you are ready. It contains everything I managed to save from your original life. It isn't much, but it is yours. It has always been yours. The wooden box. Evelyn looked at it sitting on the floor beside the rocking chair, innocent and terrible. She wasn't ready to open it. Wasn't sure she would ever be ready. But the letter was nearly finished, and she had come too far to stop now. If you choose to search for your biological family, I will not blame you. If you choose to hate me, I will understand. If you choose to expose what we did, I will accept whatever judgment comes, even from beyond the grave. You deserve the truth. You have always deserved it. I am sorry it has taken my death to give it to you. Evelyn's hands were shaking so badly now that the paper rattled. Her mother's signature was at the bottom, Martha Ann Crawford, written in the same careful hand as the rest of the letter, but with a slight tremor that hadn't been there in the earlier lines. She had been crying when she signed it. Evelyn could tell. Below the signature there was a postscript. P.S. Your real birthday is January 14th, 1971, not July 23rd, as you have always believed. I am sorry we even took that from you. I am sorry for all of it. But I will never be sorry for the years we had together. You were the greatest joy of my life. I hope I was, in some small way, a joy in yours. With all my love, always, Mum. Mum. The word felt strange now. Foreign. Like trying to speak a language she'd forgotten. Martha Crawford had been her mother for 53 years, had changed her diapers and nursed her through chickenpox and taught her to sew and attended every parent-teacher conference and cried at her wedding and held her hand through her divorce. She had been there for everything. She had been love itself, solid and unconditional, but she had also been a liar, a kidnapper, someone who had stolen another woman's child and raised her as her own. Both things were true. Evelyn didn't know how to hold both truths in her heart at the same time, didn't know how to reconcile the mother she had known with the criminal her mother had confessed to being. She set the letter down carefully on the windowsill and reached for the wooden box. Her hands moved slowly, mechanically, as if they belonged to someone else. The box was smooth and heavy. She turned it over, examining it more closely now. There was a small brass latch on one side, tarnished with age. She pressed it with her thumb and the lid opened with a soft click. Inside, lined with faded blue velvet, were a handful of objects. A birth certificate. Evelyn lifted it out with trembling fingers. Sarah Elizabeth Hartley. Born January 14th, 1971, at Mercy General Hospital. Mother, Rebecca Ann Hartley. Father, Thomas James Hartley. The paper was official, state-issued, with a raised seal in the corner. This was the real one, the true one. Everything else, the birth certificate she had used to get her driver's license, to apply for college, to prove she was who she thought she was, had been a forgery. Beneath the birth certificate was a photograph. It was small, wallet-sized, the colors faded to soft pastels. A young couple looked out at her from another time. The man was tall and dark-haired, handsome in a rough, working-class way. He wore a denim shirt with the sleeves rolled up, showing strong forearms. His eyes were blue, the same blue as Evelyn's eyes. The woman beside him was tiny, delicate, with light brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was smiling, but there was something fragile about the smile, something that didn't quite reach her eyes. She held a baby in her arms, a baby in a yellow blanket, the same yellow blanket from the letter. Evelyn stared at the photograph until her eyes burned. These were her parents, her real parents, Thomas and Rebecca Hartley. They looked so young, so unprepared for what was coming. Did they know when this photo was taken that their lives were about to fall apart, that their daughter was about to disappear? There were other things in the box. A silver rattle, tarnished black with age, a tiny bracelet with the name Sarah engraved on it, a hospital blanket, still folded in its original square, with Mercy General Hospital stitched across the corner. Pieces of a life that had been interrupted, stolen, erased. At the very bottom of the box was another envelope, smaller than the first, sealed with wax that had cracked with time. Evelyn's breath caught. She lifted it carefully and turned it over. Written on the front, in handwriting she didn't recognize, masculine, blocky letters, were two words. For Sarah, her original name, the name she had been given at birth, the name she had carried for 6 months before it was taken away. Evelyn broke the wax seal and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was hasty, almost frantic, some words barely legible. She had to squint to make them out. Sarah, if you ever read this, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was not strong enough. I was not brave enough. Your mother left us when you were 4 months old. She said she couldn't do it anymore, couldn't be a wife and mother, couldn't live this life. She walked out one Tuesday morning and never came back. I tried. I swear to God I tried. But I was working double shifts and you were crying all night, and I couldn't sleep and I couldn't think and I couldn't see any way forward. I thought I was going to hurt you. I thought I was going to hurt myself. So I gave you to people who could give you what I couldn't. A real home, a real family. 2 parents who loved each other. I told myself it was the right thing. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But I need you to know I loved you. I loved you so much it broke me. I hope you had a good life. I hope you were happy. I hope you never knew how much your father failed you. Thomas Hartley. Evelyn read the letter 3 times. Each time the words cut deeper. This was her father speaking to her across 53 years, explaining the choice that had destroyed multiple lives. He hadn't sold her, hadn't kidnapped her with malicious intent. He had been drowning, desperate, seeing no other way out. He had made a terrible decision from a place of utter brokenness. Did that make it forgivable? Did it make any of this forgivable? Evelyn didn't know. She pressed the letter against her chest and closed her eyes. Somewhere beneath her ribs, beneath bone and muscle and years of carefully constructed identity, something was cracking open. Grief, rage, confusion, relief. It was all there, tangled together, impossible to separate. She had spent 53 years being Evelyn Crawford, teacher, daughter, sister, divorcee. She had built an entire existence on that foundation, and now the foundation was gone, revealed as nothing more than prettily arranged lies. Who was she supposed to be now? How was she supposed to move forward when she didn't even know which direction was forward anymore? Evelyn sat in the attic until the afternoon light faded to dusk. She didn't move, didn't cry, didn't do anything except exist in the strange, hollow space between who she had been and who she might become. The letters and photographs and birth certificate lay scattered around her like debris from a shipwreck, evidence of a disaster 53 years in the making. Finally, as the room grew too dark to see clearly, she gathered everything carefully and placed it back in the wooden box. The birth certificate, the photograph of Thomas and Rebecca, the hospital blanket, the bracelet with her stolen name, Thomas's letter to the daughter he gave away, and her mother's confession, folded and placed on top of everything else. She closed the box and held it against her chest as she descended the attic stairs. The house was cold and empty. Daniel had stopped by earlier in the week to make sure the heat was still running, but it barely made a dent in the November chill. Evelyn didn't care. She barely felt it. In the kitchen, she made tea she wouldn't drink. The ritual was comforting, even if the result wasn't. She sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd done homework as a child, where her family had shared thousands of meals, and opened the wooden box again. She needed to look at the photograph one more time, needed to see the faces of the people who had created her. Thomas Hartley looked kind. That was the thing that struck her most forcefully. His eyes were sad, yes, but kind. He had the face of someone who tried his best and failed. Rebecca looked lost, like she was already gone even though she was still standing there in the photograph, holding her baby, pretending to smile. What had happened to them? The question crystallized in Evelyn's mind with sudden, fierce urgency. Thomas had written that letter 53 years ago. Was he still alive? Was Rebecca? Did they ever look for her? Did they ever regret what happened? And then, like a punch to the chest, came the revelation that made everything else seem small. Did she have siblings? The thought took her breath away. Thomas and Rebecca had been young when they had her, early 20s. They could have had other children afterward. She could have brothers or sisters who had no idea she existed. A whole other family living their lives somewhere, unaware that part of their history had been erased. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. She couldn't sit still anymore, couldn't just accept this information passively. She had spent her entire adult life teaching students to research, to investigate, to dig for truth. Now it was time to do the same for herself. But where did she start? She looked at the birth certificate again. Mercy General Hospital. She knew that hospital. It was in county, about 40 miles away. It was still operating. They would have records. Maybe, if she was lucky, if those records hadn't been destroyed or lost or sealed. And then there was the surname, Hartley. It wasn't uncommon, but it wasn't generic either. There might be Hartleys still in the area. She could search, she could ask around, she could... Her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. She pulled it out and saw Daniel's name on the screen. She stared at it for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the answer button. What would she say to him? How could she possibly explain any of this? She let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a text appeared. Just checking on you. Coming by tomorrow to help with more sorting. Love you, sis. Sis. Sister. The word felt complicated now. Daniel was her brother according to law, according to paperwork, according to shared childhood and family loyalty. But they didn't share blood. Didn't share biological parents. Did that matter? Should it matter? Evelyn didn't know. She didn't know anything anymore. She pulled out her laptop. She'd left it at her mother's house weeks ago, too grief-stricken to care about practical things, and opened it on the kitchen table. The screen glowed in the darkening room. She typed Thomas James Hartley into the search bar, then added the county name and the year 1971. Nothing immediately useful came up. A few obituaries for men with the same name, but the dates were wrong. Some social media profiles, but they belonged to people too young. A few business listings. Nothing that connected to her story. She tried Rebecca Ann Hartley next. Even less information. The name was more common than Thomas. Pages and pages of search results, none of them obviously relevant. Evelyn sat back, frustrated. Of course it wouldn't be this easy. Nothing about this situation was easy. She would need to dig deeper. Birth records, marriage records, death records, census data, property records, the kind of detective work that took time and patience and resources. But she had time. She had nothing but time now. School didn't resume until after New Year's. She had taken a leave of absence for the rest of the year to handle her mother's estate. She could devote every day to this search if she needed to. The question was, did she want to? Evelyn looked around the kitchen at the familiar shapes of things made strange by twilight and revelation. The refrigerator with its collection of magnets spelling out cheerful messages. The stove where her mother had cooked countless meals. The window over the sink where she'd stood washing dishes and watching birds at the feeder and planning what to make for dinner. Every object in this house held memories. Every room contained ghosts. Could she really tear it all down? Could she expose what her parents had done, drag their names through the mud, destroy the image that everyone in this town had of the upstanding Crawford family? And if she found the Hartleys, if Thomas or Rebecca were still alive, what would she say to them? Hello, I'm the daughter you lost 53 years ago. Hello, I'm the baby who was stolen from you. Hello, I'm sorry for existing. The weight of it was crushing. Evelyn put her head down on the table and finally let herself cry. Great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Tears for the life she'd lost without knowing she'd lost it. Tears for Thomas and Rebecca and the baby Sarah who had disappeared. Tears for Martha and the secret that had eaten her alive. Tears for herself, for Evelyn, who had to somehow figure out how to exist in the wreckage. She cried until she had no tears left, until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen. And then in the silence that followed, she heard it. A soft thump from upstairs, like something falling, or someone moving. Evelyn's head shot up. The house was supposed to be empty. Daniel had his own keys, but he would have called first. She sat frozen, listening. The old house settled and creaked constantly. She knew every sound intimately, but this had been different, deliberate. Another thump, definitely from upstairs, from the direction of her mother's bedroom. Evelyn stood slowly, her heart hammering. She looked around for something to use as a weapon and settled on the heavy flashlight her father had always kept in the drawer by the door. She picked it up, surprised by how natural it felt in her hand, and moved toward the stairs. The house was completely dark now. She hadn't bothered to turn on lights. She climbed the stairs carefully, avoiding the 3rd and 7th steps that creaked. At the top, she paused. Her mother's bedroom door was ajar. She'd closed it when she left earlier. She was certain she'd closed it. Evelyn pushed the door open slowly. The hinges creaked. Inside, in the dim light from the street lamp outside, she could see a figure standing by the dresser. Tall, male, going through the drawers. "Who the hell are you?" Evelyn's voice came out stronger than she felt. She raised the flashlight. "Get out of my mother's house before I call the police." The figure turned, and in that moment, something impossible happened. She saw his face in the light from the window, saw the blue eyes, the dark hair now streaked with gray, the familiar shape of the jawline, the nose, the cheekbones. She saw it and recognized it even though she had never seen this man before in her life, because she had seen this face in the mirror every single day. "Sarah," the man whispered. His voice was rough, broken. Oh my God. Sarah. It was Thomas, her biological father, standing in her dead mother's bedroom, looking at her like he was seeing a ghost. And in that moment, Evelyn realized with a clarity that knocked the breath from her lungs, he had been looking for her. All these years. He had never stopped looking. Time stopped. The world narrowed to just the two of them standing in the darkness of her mother's bedroom, staring at each other across 53 years of absence. Evelyn couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was seeing. Thomas took a step toward her, his hands raised as if approaching a frightened animal. "Please don't run," he said. "Please. I've been searching for you for so long." His voice. That was his voice. older than it would have been that rainy night in 1971, weathered by decades and cigarettes and regret, but still fundamentally the same voice that had spoken to Martha and her husband, that had handed over a baby and walked away into the storm. "How?" Evelyn's voice cracked. She tried again. "How did you find me?" "I didn't," Thomas said. "Not until yesterday. I've been looking in all the wrong places, using all the wrong names. I thought the Crawfords might have moved away, changed their names, disappeared completely. But then I saw the obituary. Martha Crawford, 78 years old, survived by her son Daniel and daughter Evelyn. And I knew. I don't know how, but I knew." He took another step closer. Evelyn could see his face more clearly now in the dim light. He was in his 70s, she calculated quickly, still strong-looking but worn down by time and whatever life had thrown at him. His eyes were wet. He was crying. "I came to the funeral," he said. "I stood in the back. I watched you greet people, watched you cry, watched you be the perfect daughter saying goodbye to her mother. And I wanted to run to you, to tell you everything, but I couldn't. Not there. Not like that. So I waited. I've been watching the house, waiting for the right moment. Tonight I saw you leave earlier, and I thought maybe I could find some proof, some evidence that you were really her, really my Sarah. You broke into the house." Evelyn's grip tightened on the flashlight. She was still processing, still trying to reconcile the intruder with the father. "You broke in. I'm sorry." Thomas's voice broke. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For that night. For leaving you. For not being strong enough. For not fighting harder to get you back. For 53 years of your life that I missed." He was openly sobbing now, his shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so goddamn sorry." The name hit her like a physical blow. Sarah. No one had ever called her that. It was a stranger's name. A ghost's name. But hearing it in his voice, in her father's voice, made it real in a way the birth certificate hadn't. "My name is Evelyn," she said quietly. Thomas flinched as if she'd slapped him. I know it is. I'm sorry. I don't have the right to any of this." Silence fell between them again. Evelyn's mind was racing. She had so many questions she didn't know where to start. The flashlight trembled in her hand. She should call the police. She should scream for help. She should do 1,000 things that weren't standing here in the dark, talking to the man who gave her away. But she didn't do any of those things. Instead, she asked the question that had been burning in her chest since she read the letters. "Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you try to find me sooner?" Thomas closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were haunted. "I did try. Not right away. I was a mess for months after I left you with the Crawfords. I was drinking heavily, barely functioning. But about a year later, I got myself together enough to go back. I went to their house. Your house." He gestured vaguely at the room around them. "I knocked on the door. Martha answered. She was holding you. You were maybe 18 months old, toddling around, laughing. You called her Mama." His voice broke completely. He had to stop and breathe before he could continue. "I asked if I could have you back. Begged, really. Told her I was sober now, that I had a steady job, that I could be the father you deserved. And she just looked at me with such sadness, such pity, and said, 'She doesn't remember you. She's happy now. Do you really want to tear her away from the only parents she's ever known?' And I looked at you, at this beautiful little girl who was so clearly loved and cared for, and I knew she was right. I had given up that right. I had made my choice." Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. She could picture it so clearly. Young Thomas on the doorstep, Martha holding toddler Evelyn, both of them knowing that whatever happened next would destroy someone. "So I left again," Thomas continued. "I made Martha promise to take care of you, to give you a good life, she promised, and I walked away. But I never stopped thinking about you, never stopped wondering if I'd made the right choice." "Did you?" Evelyn asked. "Make the right choice?" Thomas looked at her for a long moment. Really looked at her, taking in the woman she'd become. "I don't know," he finally said. "You seem like you turned out okay, better than okay. You're a teacher, right? I read that in the obituary. Martha's daughter Evelyn, a high school history teacher. That's good. That's real good." The second revelation hit then, even harder than the first. "Rebecca," Evelyn said suddenly. "What happened to Rebecca?" Thomas's face darkened. This was the part he hadn't wanted to tell. Evelyn could see it in the way his whole body tensed, the way he looked away from her. "Thomas." Her voice was steel now. "What happened to my mother?" "She's dead," he said flatly. "She died 6 months after she left us. Overdose, pills and alcohol. They found her in a motel room in Nevada. She'd been dead for 3 days before anyone noticed. The words landed like blows. Her birth mother, the woman who had carried her, delivered her, nursed her for 4 months, had died when Evelyn was barely a year old, had died alone and desperate and so far from home, had died never knowing what happened to her daughter. Did she? Evelyn's throat was so tight she could barely force the words out. Did she know I was gone? Did you tell her? No. Thomas shook his head. I didn't know where she was. She'd left no forwarding address, no phone number, just disappeared. By the time I heard about her death, you'd been with the Crawfords for months. It was too late. Everything was too late. Evelyn thought she'd run out of tears earlier. She was wrong. They came again now, hot and bitter. For Rebecca, who never got the chance to come back. For Thomas, who carried the guilt of 2 losses. For herself, for Sarah, for whoever she was supposed to be, now that all the lies had been stripped away. I have something for you, Thomas said suddenly. He reached into his jacket pocket slowly, carefully, aware that she still held the flashlight like a weapon. He pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth and held it out to her. I've been carrying this for 53 years. Waiting. Evelyn took it with shaking hands. She unwrapped the cloth carefully. Inside was a photograph, different from the one in the wooden box, but similar. It showed Rebecca in a hospital bed, exhausted but smiling, holding a newborn baby. Her, Sarah, just hours old. That was taken about 3 hours after you were born, Thomas said softly. January 14th, 1971, 3:15 in the morning. You came early. We weren't ready. We weren't ready for any of it. But for those first few months, before everything fell apart, we loved you. We both loved you so much. Evelyn stared at the photograph, at Rebecca's face, so young and hopeful, not yet knowing that she had only 4 more months with her daughter, only 8 more months of life. So you look like her, Thomas said, more than you look like me. The eyes are mine, but everything else, that's all Rebecca. They sat together in her mother's kitchen for hours, not Martha's kitchen anymore. The thought felt strange and sad and somehow true. Just a kitchen where 2 people who shared DNA but not history tried to find some common ground. Thomas told her everything, about meeting Rebecca at a diner where she waitressed, about their quick courtship and quicker marriage, about the joy when they discovered she was pregnant, followed by the terror when they realized how unprepared they were, about Rebecca's postpartum depression that nobody understood or knew how to treat back then, about the morning she left without a word. She kissed you goodbye, he said. I saw her do it. I was pretending to be asleep, but I saw her lean over the crib and kiss your forehead. Then she looked at me, and I knew she knew I was awake. She didn't say anything. Just picked up her purse and walked out. I thought she'd come back, I really did. I thought she just needed some space. Evelyn listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, just let him talk, let 53 years of silence spill out between them. He told her about the years after he gave her away, how he'd moved around unable to settle anywhere, how he'd married twice more and divorced twice more, how he'd had 2 other children, her half-siblings, she realized with a start, but had never been able to be the father he should have been because he was haunted by the daughter he'd given away. They're grown now, he said. Melissa is 48. James is 45. I wasn't a great dad to them either, but at least I tried. At least I didn't abandon them. Half-siblings. Evelyn had half-siblings. The thought was overwhelming, exciting and terrifying in equal measure. Do they know about me? She asked. Thomas shook his head. I never told them. I was too ashamed, but I want to now. If you'll let me, if you want to meet them. Did she? Evelyn didn't know. She didn't know anything anymore, except that her entire identity had been rebuilt in the span of 1 day, and she was still standing somehow, still breathing, still here. She made more tea, real tea this time, which they both drank. She brought down the wooden box and showed Thomas what Martha had saved. He held the silver rattle and wept. He looked at the hospital blanket and traced the stitching with 1 finger. He read his own letter to Sarah and shook his head at the man he used to be. I was so young, he said, so stupid, so weak. You were broken, Evelyn corrected gently. There's a difference. They talked until dawn began to lighten the kitchen windows. At some point, Evelyn realized she had made a decision without consciously making it. She wasn't going to call the police. Wasn't going to turn Thomas in for breaking and entering. Wasn't going to expose what Martha and her husband had done all those years ago. What purpose would it serve? Everyone who had made those terrible choices was either dead or sitting across from her, already punished by decades of guilt and loss. No court could impose a sentence worse than what they'd already lived through. "I don't forgive you," she said finally, as the sky turned pink outside the window. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I don't hate you either. I don't know what I feel except confused and angry and sad and grateful all at once." Thomas nodded. "That's fair. That's more than fair. I need time," Evelyn continued. "I need to figure out who I am now, figure out what to do with all of this. I have a brother who doesn't know his sister is actually someone else. I have a job and a life and an identity built on a foundation that turned out to be quicksand. I can't just jump into being Sarah again." "I understand." Thomas stood slowly, joints creaking. He looked old in the morning light, tired. Would it be okay if I gave you my phone number? If you wanted to call sometime? Or not? Whatever you need." Evelyn took his number, saved it in her phone under Thomas Hartley. Not Dad. Not yet. Maybe never. But his name, at least. She walked him to the door. On the porch, he turned back to her. "I meant what I said in that letter I wrote you. I loved you. I still love you. I know I have no right to say that, but it's true." Evelyn didn't respond. She just watched him walk to an old pickup truck parked down the street and drive away. Then she went back inside, closed the door, and stood in the hallway of the house where she'd grown up, feeling like a stranger in her own life. Her phone buzzed. "Daniel. Running late but still coming over around 10. Maybe we can tackle the basement today." The basement. Full of more boxes, more memories, more pieces of the life she thought she'd known. Evelyn stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back, "Actually, can we talk instead? I have something to tell you." She didn't know what she would say yet. Didn't know how much she would reveal, but Daniel deserved some version of the truth. They were family. Not by blood, but by choice. By years. By love. That had to count for something. She spent the next hour preparing. She laid everything out on the dining room table like evidence at a trial. Martha's letter, Thomas's letter, the birth certificate, the photographs, the hospital blanket, the bracelet with a name that wasn't Evelyn. When Daniel arrived, she met him at the door. He took one look at her face and knew something was wrong. "Ev, what happened? Are you okay?" "No," she said honestly, "but I will be. Come inside. I need to show you something." They sat at the dining room table, and Evelyn told him everything. About the hidden compartment in the desk, about Martha's confession, about Thomas showing up in the night, about Sarah Elizabeth Hartley, and the life that had been stolen and the life that had been given in exchange. Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. "You're still my sister," he said. "I don't care what any paper says. You're still my sister." Evelyn squeezed his hand and finally, for the first time since this nightmare began, felt something solid beneath her feet. Not the foundation she'd thought she had, but something new, something real. "Thank you," she whispered. They spent the rest of the morning talking through what to do next. Daniel, ever practical, pointed out that technically Evelyn's entire legal identity was fraudulent. Her birth certificate, her social security number, her teaching license. Everything could be challenged if this came to light. "But who's going to challenge it?" he asked. "Mum's gone, Dad's gone. Thomas isn't going to file a police report after 53 years. The only people who could cause trouble are you and me, and we're not going to. So maybe we just keep this quiet. Maybe we let sleeping dogs lie." Evelyn considered it. It was tempting. So tempting. To just put everything back in the wooden box, hide it away again, and go on being Evelyn Crawford. To teach her classes and see her friends and live her life without this complication. But she couldn't. She knew she couldn't. Because there were two other people who deserved to know the truth. Two half-siblings who had no idea they had a sister. And there was Thomas, who had spent 53 years wondering. And there was Rebecca, dead but not forgotten, whose story deserved to be known. "I'm going to reach out to Thomas," she said. "I'm going to meet Melissa and James. I'm going to find out what happened to Rebecca's family. I'm going to piece together the life I should have had, even if I can't live it now." Daniel nodded. "Okay, but you're not doing it alone. I'm with you. Whatever you need." If this letter moved you, if you understand that truth, no matter how painful, is worth seeking, please share this story. Like this video. Comment below with your thoughts about forgiveness, identity, and the families we're born into versus the families we become. Some truths can't stay buried forever. 3 months later, Evelyn sat in a coffee shop in a town she'd never been to, waiting to meet her half-sister. Melissa had been shocked by the phone call, disbelieving at first, but Thomas had confirmed it, and DNA tests had removed any remaining doubt. Sarah Elizabeth Hartley, presumed lost, had been found. Melissa walked in right on time. Evelyn would have recognized her anywhere. She had Thomas's eyes. Their eyes. They stared at each other for a moment. Then Melissa smiled, tentative and hopeful. "Sarah?" Evelyn took a breath. "Actually," she said, "I go by Evelyn now, but you can call me Ev." And just like that, the future began. She would never fully be Sarah again. That little girl was gone, lost to time and choices made in desperation. But she could be Evelyn, who knew about Sarah. Evelyn, who carried both names, both histories. Evelyn, who understood that identity wasn't just one thing, but layers of truth and memory and love, complicated and messy and real. She thought of Martha's letter. "You were the greatest joy of my life." Despite everything, despite the lies and the theft and the decades of deception, that had been true. Martha had loved her, had given her a good life, had been a good mother in every way that mattered, except honesty. And Thomas, broken and weak and desperate, had loved her too. Had given her away because he thought it was best, then spent the rest of his life trying to find her again. And Rebecca, who Evelyn would never know, who had died too young and too alone. She had loved her daughter too, in the 4 months they had together. That love had been real, even if it ended in tragedy. All of it was true, all of it mattered. The stolen life and the given life. Sarah and Evelyn, the Hartleys and the Crawfords. You didn't have to choose one truth over another. You could hold them all, even when they contradicted each other, even when they hurt. Evelyn sat across from her half-sister and began to tell her story. The whole story, all the truths, no matter how painful. Because that's what you did with family, with real family. You told the truth and you hoped they loved you anyway. And as she talked, as Melissa listened with tears streaming down her face, Evelyn realized something profound. She was still standing, still whole, still herself, whoever that self turned out to be. The letter had destroyed her old life, but it had also given her a chance to build a new one based on truth instead of lies, one where she could be both Sarah and Evelyn, both stolen and chosen, both lost and found. And that, she thought, was worth everything.